Imagine pardoning 600 attackers of police, a dark web drug lord, even a man tied to murder for hire. That's the world Kash Patel defended, and now the Senate is tearing him apart. With America's justice on the line, will he crumble or drag democracy down with him? The hearing room feels airless, like someone vacuum-sealed the oxygen and left only heat and light. Camera bulbs pop in nervous bursts. The clock above the seal refuses to move. A single cough ricochets off the wood paneling and dies in the velvet hush. Reporters crowd the rail, lenses poised like rifle scopes, waiting for the first misstep. Microphones bloom from the dais in a chrome thicket, red tally lights winking to life. Even the stenographer sits straighter, fingers hovering like a trap about to spring. Kash Patel takes his seat with the careful grace of a man stepping onto thin ice. Loyalist, climber, lightning rod, his reputation enters a split second before he does. Ambition has always fit him like a tailored suit. Controversy hangs on the same hanger. He smooths a cufflink that doesn't need smoothing and leans toward counsel, lips barely moving. An aide slides a folder under his elbow, bold-faced lines with tabs screaming urgent and media. He doesn't look at the cameras, but the cameras look at him. Across the divide sits Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, chin set, binder thick enough to anchor a ship. Years of hearings have carved him into something surgical, efficient, unblinking, precise. He doesn't hunt headlines. He hunts inconsistencies. Whitehouse thumbs to a flagged page, the paper whispering like a fuse catching flame. Staffers orbit him in quiet ellipses, passing documents without sound. The committee chair nods once, and the room contracts around his microphone. Two armies face each other without uniforms, only colors of paper and tones of voice. On Patel's side, loyalty as shield, talking points as spears, the promise of denial sharpened to a point. On Whitehouse's, chronology, affidavits, and a habit of asking questions that answer themselves. In the gallery, a retired officer in a navy blazer stares straight ahead, jaw locked, hands folded around an old challenge coin. A pair of tourists, here by luck, forget to breathe as security shifts, boots whispering on carpet. The air tastes like a verdict no one wants to say out loud. The chair recognizes the senator. A forest of screens flickers as feeds go live nationwide. A condenser mic pulls in every heartbeat and paper rustle. Even the cooling vent seems to hush. For a heartbeat, time balances on the edge of a name. Whitehouse lowers the binder until the tabs line up like teeth, and the first page stares back with a still image everyone has already seen. Patel's team steels themselves, eyes fixed, knuckles pale under fluorescence. What will break first? The story, the man, or the chamber's composure? The first blow doesn't arrive as a whisper. It strikes like cold steel meeting bone. Senator Whitehouse leans forward, slides a still frame across the desk. A man gripping a chainsaw, eyes wild, enemies carved from shadows. The massive screen behind him flickers to life, replaying the video, and the growl of the blade fills the chamber like a phantom sound, vibrating against every wooden panel. Kash Patel shifts in his seat, straightening his spine as though posture alone could shield him. His jaw tightens, fingers laced too neatly, betraying the discipline of someone who has rehearsed for weeks. Senator, I had nothing to do with the creation of that, Patel says, his tone clipped, his delivery deliberate. Yet his eyes move faster than his words. They dart down to the paper, slide left toward counsel, then snap back up, desperate to find a safe anchor in the storm. The gallery responds like an animal waking from slumber. Pens scrape violently across notepads, shutters click in rapid fire. The journalists, silent hunters until now, lean forward with renewed hunger. Every twitch of Patel's face, every falter in his breath is captured, dissected, and broadcast live to millions. It is blood in the water, and the predators are circling. Whitehouse remains still, unshaken. His voice doesn't rise, it sharpens. Is that you, Mr. Patel, reposting it at the top of that page? The question is precise, stripped of ornament, the kind of query designed not to seek explanation, but to corner. Patel inhales, too slow, and lets the silence stretch a beat too long. Finally, with the reluctant drop of a blade, he concedes. That's me at the top. The admission explodes like shrapnel. A dozen keyboards clatter at once. Reporters already shaping the headline. Patel admits chainsaw post. The senator's gaze pins him in place, and suddenly the loyal soldier no longer appears as a stalwart defender of law, but as a man whose credibility is bleeding out in public view. Patel tries to steady himself, leans toward the microphone as if volume could substitute for conviction. Senator, again, I had nothing to do with creating the content. His words fall heavy but hollow, a denial without weight, a shield fractured by its own weakness. The tremor beneath his voice betrays him, echoing louder than his denial ever could. Around the chamber, the tension thickens until the air itself seems viscous. The senators shift in their seats, staffers freeze mid-note, and even the cooling vents seem to silence themselves. Whitehouse has drawn blood, and the strategy is written in the air. Peel away Patel's carefully constructed facade, strip him of his rehearsed defenses, leave him standing on instinct alone. And instinct under lights this hot is not salvation, it is exposure. Was this the unmasking of a dangerous truth, or the first step in a ruthless political witch hunt? Whitehouse lets the silence hang for a moment, then draws from a different arsenal. Not documents, not video, but memory. His voice, low and measured, cuts through the stillness. I remember January 6th, he begins, and instantly the chamber tightens. He paints the picture like a battlefield report, colleagues sprinting through marble corridors, shoes pounding against centuries-old stone, shouts ripping through the air, lock the doors, get down, run. The echoes of panic still cling to the Capitol's walls even years later. He recalls the sound of glass shattering, the scramble of lawmakers crouching beneath benches, eyes wide with the kind of fear that leaves scars. Outside, chants twisted into threats. Inside, the constitutional heartbeat of the nation skipped wildly, uncertain if it would recover. SWAT teams stormed the halls, rifles up, helmets gleaming under emergency lights. The images flash like a war zone. Automatic weapons guarding staircases, shields locking into place, agents barking orders while ushering trembling legislators to safety. Democracy itself had to be carried down those hallways under armed escort. Whitehouse doesn't embellish. He doesn't need to. The memory is a wound. Not one of us, he says slowly, called for violent rioters to be pardoned that day. Not one. His words settle like a verdict, reminding everyone of the line that should never have been crossed. The room breathes heavier, as if pulled back into that smoke-choked afternoon. Staffers exchange glances, reporters scribble harder, and Patel sits motionless, pinned by the weight of history summoned against him. For those listening, it feels less like a senator speaking than a survivor testifying. The imagery is too vivid, the fear too real. It's not a story told. It's a nightmare relived, a glimpse of what it looks like when a democracy teeters on the edge of collapse. And in that chamber, under those lights, the message is undeniable. January 6th was not politics. It was apocalypse knocking at the nation's door. Whitehouse's tone sharpens, shifting from memory to indictment. He flips the page and numbers spill out like bullets. Over 600 individuals who struck, kicked, and beat Capitol police officers. Pardoned. The word lingers like a curse. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. The chamber itself recoils. Faces in the gallery harden. A retired officer's jaw clenches, the veins in his neck stiff with fury. The idea that those who cracked skulls and broke bones now walk free, by decree, not by justice, hits heavier than any gavel. The silence isn't quiet. It's the hum of outrage. But Whitehouse doesn't stop. He moves to the next wound. And then, a dark web operator, sentenced to life for pumping poison into American streets, accused of arranging murder for hire from behind his keyboard. Freed. The word strikes the room again, colder this time, more dangerous. The air grows thick, like smoke seeping in through invisible cracks. Senators shift uneasily, staffers scribble furiously. Somewhere in the press row, a pen snaps in half. The list of pardons no longer feels like mercy. It feels like an arsenal handed to men who already chose violence once. Patel clears his throat, finally speaking. Mistakes, he mutters, carefully chosen, as if that single word could shrink the enormity of what Whitehouse has laid bare. His voice aims for control, but it sounds like a man bargaining with an avalanche. Whitehouse pounces. "No, Mr. Patel, not mistakes. Signals." His eyes burn across the desk, a flare aimed directly at Patel. "Signals to the violent, the corrupt, the ruthless, that loyalty is worth more than law. That violence can be rewarded, not punished." The line hangs electric, impossible to ignore. Reporters are already typing the headline. Cameras drinking in Patel's tightening jaw. The senator has drawn the frame, and in it, mercy looks like menace, law looks like weakness, and power looks terrifyingly close to lawlessness. And for everyone watching, the question presses down like a weight. If those pardons were truly signals, then what message has America already sent to its darkest corners? Whitehouse doesn't just speak in abstractions, he drags the consequences into living rooms across America. He opens a folder and a name surfaces. An Ohio police officer beaten nearly to death on January 6th, left with broken ribs and a permanent limp. His attacker, once sentenced, now walks free. The chamber shifts. The senator's words spill into story. The officer's family gathered around their kitchen table, watching the news in disbelief as the pardon scrolled across the ticker. His daughter, 16, slammed her phone down, tears burning in her eyes. His wife whispered only one word: betrayal. That story spread like wildfire. Local papers carried it first, then national outlets amplified it. Images of the officer in uniform, smiling with his children, stood side by side with headlines announcing his attacker's release. For millions of Americans, it wasn't policy. It was a gut punch. Neighbors brought casseroles, shook their heads, and muttered about law and order unraveling. Talk radio lit up with callers asking how justice could be so casually erased. At church the following Sunday, the officer sat in silence as prayers were offered, not just for his recovery, but for a country many feared was slipping away. Patel shifts in his chair, silent, while Whitehouse drives the knife deeper. When a man can beat a cop, face justice, and then stroll free because loyalty outweighed law, what do you think that family feels? What do you think millions of families watching feel? The senator's voice is calm, but the fury beneath it simmers like molten steel. The gallery holds its breath. Journalists type furiously, knowing that beyond statistics and rhetoric, this single family's anguish crystallizes the entire debate. Their grief is not partisan. Their outrage is not ideological. It is human. And in that silence, heavy and suffocating, one question settles over the chamber like a storm cloud. When law itself bends to politics, where can ordinary citizens place their faith? The senator pauses, letting the weight of family's anguish seep into every corner of the room. Then with a slow breath, he turns a page, and the next strike comes not from Democrats, not from opponents, but from Patel's own side. He begins with Bill Barr, Trump's former attorney general, the man who once commanded the Justice Department itself. Whitehouse reads the words with surgical precision. This nominee has virtually no experience that would qualify him. He would never command the respect necessary to run the bureau. The line lands like a hammer blow, and Patel stiffens as though Barr himself had entered the chamber. But Whitehouse is not done. He flips again, this time to CIA Director Gina Haspel. The quote is colder, sharper, like glass. "I would resign rather than serve under him." Gasps ripple through the gallery. Even in Washington, where betrayal is currency, a resignation threat from the CIA director is no ordinary rebuke. It is a verdict of unfitness delivered from the heart of the intelligence community. The final cut comes with John Bolton, former National Security Advisor. No stranger to sharp words. "I didn't think he was qualified. I was forced to hire him." The phrasing drips with disdain, the image conjuring Patel not as a trusted lieutenant, but as baggage dragged unwillingly into power. 3 voices, 3 knives, and each one from the circle Patel once called his own. The chamber bristles with unease. These aren't partisan critics, Whitehouse reminds the room. These are Republicans, Trump appointees, insiders who saw Patel up close and found him wanting. The betrayal is total, impossible to dismiss. Patel sits frozen, his face locked in the practiced stillness of a man who knows cameras are everywhere. But stillness cannot hide the tremor in the air, because everyone watching understands. In politics, enemies wound, but it is allies who kill reputations. And now Patel bleeds not from across the aisle, but from the very hands that once lifted him. The knives are in, and Whitehouse twists them with quiet precision. Patel finally moves, a flicker of defiance breaking through the mask. He leans forward, lips pressed tight, and the microphone catches the faint rasp in his throat. "This is nothing more than a political conspiracy," he declares, words fired like bullets meant to pierce the wall of accusations. But the delivery betrays him. His voice quivers at the edges, thin in places where it should be iron. His eyes scan the dais too quickly, sliding from senator to senator, hunting for a sympathetic face and finding none. The image on camera is not of a warrior striking back. It is of a man searching desperately for escape routes. Reporters pounce instantly, fingers flying, headlines already forming. Patel cries conspiracy. Their pens are merciless, their metaphors sharper than knives. One whispers to another, "He looks like a fighter trapped in the corner, swinging blind." The description sticks, and by nightfall it will be everywhere. Patel is the boxer too battered to land a clean punch. He raises his voice, trying again. "I served this country. I defended the president when others turned away. And now you smear me with half-truths and lies?" The cadence aims for righteous anger, but instead it trembles with panic, the sound of a man losing altitude. Whitehouse doesn't even interject. He lets the silence answer, lets Patel's own performance crumble under its weight. Cameras linger on the beads of sweat at Patel's temple, on the rigid grip of his hands clasped too tight. Every detail betrays the desperation behind the words. The room feels like a prize fight in its final round. The crowd knows the rhythm, the challenger swinging wildly, the champion conserving energy, waiting for the opening that ends it. Patel is throwing punches that connect with air, each one weaker than the last. And in that chamber under the blinding lights, his counterattack collapses not with a bang, but with the slow, public unraveling of a man trying to fight shadows. The audience doesn't see strength. They see a cornered figure flailing against an enemy far larger than the words on his lips. Whitehouse waits until Patel's final words dissolve into the stale air of the chamber. Then, with the calm of a surgeon, he pivots, not to Patel directly, but to history itself. The silence grows heavier as he invokes names that still echo with dread. "Joseph McCarthy," he begins, and the gallery stiffens. Images of witch hunts, blacklists, ruined careers flood into the mind's eye. Senators in the 1950s wielding fear like a weapon, destroying lives in the name of loyalty. Whitehouse lets the name linger, a ghost dragged into the present. Then another shadow falls, J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI's legendary director, but also its most feared. A man who collected dossiers like ammunition, who threatened presidents with secrets, who turned the machinery of justice into a personal fortress. That, Whitehouse says coldly, is what happens when power bends to vengeance. The chamber seems to contract. In Patel's stillness, in the camera's unblinking gaze, the implication is unmistakable. History has seen men like him before, men who dressed loyalty as patriotism but wielded it as a weapon. Whitehouse leans closer, voice sinking to a razor's whisper. Justice, in the hands of the blindly loyal, is not justice at all. It is poison. The words slice through the silence like a scalpel. No theatrics, no shouting, just a verdict etched in stone. The imagery clings to the air, poison coursing through the veins of democracy, subtle at first, fatal in time. A slow death administered not by enemies abroad, but by servants within who mistake obedience for duty. Reporters scribble the line furiously, knowing it will outlive the hearing. Staffers exchange glances, their faces pale as though ghosts themselves had passed through the room. And Patel sits under the weight of that history, a man not only judged by his words, but measured against the darkest chapters of America's past. The senator's voice hardens once more. Blind loyalty can be dressed as glory, but in truth, it may be democracy's death sentence. The question hangs, sharp and merciless, daring every soul in the room and every viewer watching across the nation to answer, is blind loyalty a badge of honor or the executioner's blade. The chamber is already haunted by history when Whitehouse delivers his final strike. He doesn't need speculation now. He has the judgment of the law itself. He lifts a sheet of paper, its edges trembling slightly under the fluorescent glare, and begins to read. From a Colorado courtroom, the words arrive like a gavel crashing down. This witness is not credible. His testimony is illogical, devoid of evidence. The phrase hangs in the air, cold and merciless. This is no senator's opinion, no partisan barb. This is the voice of a judge, carved into the official record. Patel's composure flickers. The camera catches it. The tiny falter in his breathing, the blink held too long. For weeks he had framed every attack as politics. But now politics is stripped away. What remains is the raw verdict of the judiciary, a system he cannot dismiss with claims of conspiracy. Whitehouse seizes the moment, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. This is not politics, he says, each syllable deliberate, sharp as stone striking steel. This is justice. The gallery absorbs it like a final blow. Reporters lower their pens for a moment, as if acknowledging that the story has just written its own headline. Senators shift, some leaning forward, others leaning back, but all aware that the Colorado ruling has set the floor beneath them. Patel presses his lips tight, hands clasped as though bracing for impact. But nothing can soften what has been unleashed. He has not only been accused, he has been judged in black ink under oath by a court of law. And in that instant, the narrative shifts. No longer is Patel simply a controversial figure under fire. He becomes something far graver, a man officially branded untrustworthy by the very institution he seeks to lead. The silence that follows is not empty. It is final. It is the silence of a chamber that has just witnessed a reputation collapse under the weight of its own record. And for Kash Patel, there is no appeal left in the court of public opinion. The hearing adjourns, the gavel falls, and the chamber exhales. But Patel cannot. He rises slowly from his seat, his figure stiff, his expression locked in that half mask of defiance and denial. For hours he had been the center of fire, the axis around which every question spun. Now as he steps into the corridor, the weight of silence becomes unbearable. The hallway stretches before him, long, sterile, lit by harsh fluorescent bulbs. His shoes strike the marble floor in echoes too loud, too empty. This is no victory walk. It is the march of a man leaving behind not applause, but judgment. Around him, allies who once nodded in solidarity peel away, slipping into side doors without a glance. Their silence is a verdict of its own. Power, Patel realizes, is not lost in a single blow. It drains moment by moment as friends choose survival over loyalty. Then the ambush begins. Reporters swarm from every corner, microphones thrust like spears, cameras flashing in blinding bursts. Mr. Patel, do you deny the judge's words? Were you lying under oath? How do you respond to Barr, Haspel, Bolton? The questions overlap, a cacophony of accusations disguised as inquiries. He raises a hand to shield his face, his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed against the assault. But the lenses catch everything. The sweat at his temple, the tremor in his step, the desperate attempt to appear unbroken while the world watches the cracks spread. In the background, staffers whisper, aides hurry past, senators vanish into elevators. No one waits for him. No hand reaches out. The man who once carried the confidence of power now walks alone, a figure adrift in the very halls where his ambition once soared. One last camera flash burns across his face, freezing him in stark contrast. Kash Patel, the loyal soldier, the political fighter, now rendered in a single tragic image. A man surrounded by noise but condemned to absolute solitude. The corridors of power, once his battlefield, now echo with his isolation. The man who sought to wield authority leaves instead as its casualty, powerless, voiceless, utterly alone. Back inside the chamber, the room has not yet released its grip. Whitehouse, steady as ever, leans forward with the weight of a man who knows his words will outlive the moment. His gaze sweeps the senators, the press, the cameras, and then sharpens into a blade. When power rests in the hands of the dishonest, he says, voice slow, deliberate, every syllable carrying the weight of prophecy. The nation will bleed. The line drops like a guillotine. For a second, no one moves. The words reverberate through the high ceilings, through the marble, through the bones of every person present. It is not a metaphor, not a flourish. It is a warning carved in stone. Reporters freeze mid-keystroke, eyes lifted, as if the sentence itself had paralyzed the room. Staffers sit stiff-backed, their pens hovering, unwilling to break the silence. Even the air feels heavier, as though the chamber itself understood the gravity of what had just been spoken. On the witness table, Patel's seat now sits empty. Yet the shadow of his presence lingers. His denial, his defiance, his unraveling, they hang there, a specter, proof of what Whitehouse has just declared. The senator does not raise his voice, but the power in his tone is undeniable. History has shown us, he continues, that when loyalty eclipses truth, when vengeance disguises itself as justice, it is not just institutions that collapse, it is the lives of citizens, the blood of innocence, the soul of democracy itself. No one dares interrupt. The silence is not passive, it is oppressive, like a storm pressing down before the first crack of thunder. Every person in that room, whether ally or adversary, feels the chill creep into their spine. Because beneath the polished floor, beneath the flashing cameras, beneath the ritual of politics, the question has been laid bare, unshakable and merciless. Can a man stripped of credibility ever be trusted to hold the scales of justice? When the doors of the chamber closed, the echoes did not die. They spread like shockwaves across the nation. By dawn the next morning, every major headline carried the same brutal verdict, printed in bold across front pages. Unfit and dangerous. Television anchors repeated the words with grave tones, the footage of Patel's faltering denials running on loop. Clips of Senator Whitehouse's warning, "When power rests in the hands of the dishonest, the nation will bleed," were replayed until they became a haunting refrain, stitched into the fabric of American consciousness. On Capitol Hill, whispers turned to shouts. Lawmakers convened in hurried meetings, aides darted through hallways with stacks of printouts, and the once abstract question of Patel's nomination now hung like a noose over every conversation. Allies who once defended him retreated into silence, unwilling to stand beside a man branded a liability. Beyond Washington, the public's faith trembled. In diners across Ohio, in living rooms in Arizona, in union halls in Pennsylvania, citizens debated with unease. If this was the caliber of leadership proposed for the nation's premier law enforcement agency, what did that say about the integrity of the system itself? Inside the FBI, morale cracked. Career agents, men and women who had devoted decades to the Bureau, watched the hearings with clenched fists and clenched jaws. Their agency, built on reputation, on credibility, was suddenly dragged into the quicksand of partisanship. Every headline, every broadcast chipped away at the trust they relied upon to do their jobs. The aftershocks weren't just political, they were institutional, cultural, deeply personal. A single hearing had set fire to the credibility of a nominee and lit a question no nation can ignore. What happens when the guardians of law are seen as weapons of loyalty instead? The answer, whispered in corridors and shouted in headlines, was clear. The damage was already done. From the ashes of Patel's collapse rises a lesson too clear to ignore. Blind loyalty is not devotion, it is self-destruction. His downfall is a warning, proof that when ambition bows to obedience without conscience, the result is ruin for both the man and the institution he serves. Integrity, though less glamorous, is the only power that lasts. It does not bend with pressure or shift with politics. It stands firm, anchoring democracy when storms threaten to tear it apart. True strength is not in fiery rhetoric or pardons for the guilty, but in choosing principle over partisanship even when the cost is high. And above all, the final safeguard of freedom does not rest in the hands of politicians alone. It belongs to the people, to their vigilance, their voices, their refusal to let truth be drowned out by noise. When citizens defend honesty and demand accountability, they keep the flame of democracy alive. The hearing was more than political theater. It was a reminder written in stark relief. Blind loyalty destroys, integrity protects, and the people themselves are the last, unshakable defense against the erosion of justice. Patel emerges into the corridor, cameras exploding in white-hot bursts. Each flash captures the same haunting image, the face of a man who once sought power, now etched with defeat. No words are needed. The silence of his expression tells the story of ambition shattered under the weight of truth. Back inside, Senator Whitehouse sits quietly, his notes stacked, his gaze heavy. He looks less like a politician basking in victory and more like a judge closing the file on a case history will never forget. The chamber empties, but the echo of his warning remains. Power in unworthy hands is not governance. It is danger. And so the story ends, not with applause, but with a lesson branded into memory. Patel walks away in shadow. Democracy for now breathes in light. Before you leave, make sure you take something with you. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the real stories that shape our future. Share this video because awareness is the first defense against corruption. And tell us in the comments, what's more dangerous? A leader without competence or a leader blinded by loyalty but stripped of trust? This video is for storytelling, educational, and commentary purposes only, not legal advice or definitive judgment.